Hello my friends, it's Gabriel with the Last Huntsman channel here today, and we're going to be going over a video that I've been thinking about for a while, and you see it all throughout Hollywood and everything like that, of like the inevitable apocalypse or whatever. But one thing I thought would be kind of interesting is do a discussion and kind of semi demonstration video on melee weapons for SHTF and how handy certain ones can be, and pros and cons. So let's discuss melee weapons for SHTF. Alright, so the first melee for SHTF weapon we're going to be going over is knives. Now knives, I think, is a pretty large subject, just because they come in so many different sizes, variants. I mean, you got, Bowie knives, kukris, tantos, big knives, small knives, even little folding pocket knives and such. And so I'm gonna go over some of the obvious pros of a knife. A knife, obviously, he is mankind's first tool. You can do so much with a knife. You can chop and process wood with it, skin game, use it for hunting, and a whole lot of other things. And it's a defensive tool, obviously. There's a lot of people that are a lot smarter and wiser than I am that can show how to effectively use a knife in self-defense. And also, one major advantage of a knife is because they come in so many different sizes and has so many different capabilities, I can step back and just EDC a little pocket, a little mini fixed blade, and it could not only serve as a fixed blade, it could be a little bushcraft knife. I could, do all my camp stuff, and in a SHTF scenario, having a tool that can do so many different things, a knife, I think, is one of the most handy tools that you can have at your disposal. Alright, so I'm just going to display a little bit of knife effectiveness. This is nowhere scientific or anything. This is just me having some fun out here. So we're just going to test this out. This is the old just milk jug. So I got the Becker BK9. Let's just test this out. I'm trying to just cut the tip off here. I'm trying to take the tip off like I did. Just go berserk on it. Oh wow. I only caught it about right there. And like I was saying too, a major advantage of knives is you can get them in all different sizes and shapes and everything. So this is a Becker BK18. This is my brother's, actually. I reviewed this knife, but you could even have something that's small enough to keep on your person and be very quick and effective with a knife. Alright, so another thing to consider with any kind of a melee tool or weapon that you're using for potential defense and or offense if things get bad enough is how well can you use it within doors. Because in a modern scenario, most people are living in urban and suburban and even indoors and small confined houses and apartments and such like that. And so something to always take note of is just put your arm out and just easily move your weapon. And I even got like a ceiling fan above me. I got narrow walls and such, and so always be cognitive of that. But that's why like knives have always been like a mainstay of soldiers even since ancient times, is just because of the ability to use them as not only a tool, as a weapon, but even for close quarters. So even within my small house here, I can still do about any kind of quick knife technique. Alright, so another thing I was going to make mention is I'm not talking about just pure medieval times or ancient past. I'm talking about a modern time scenario. And so one thing to consider with a melee weapon for SHTF is how well and easy it is to utilize with modern gear. Here I have just a plate carrier on, rifle, you know, stuff that I normally would have on me, but I can still easily deploy and utilize a knife, especially if it's attached to the outside of my gear. So a knife gives you that ability there. Alright, so another tool that we're going to be going over is axes, hatchets, and tomahawks. I'm going to just kind of put those all in one group. Axes, hatchets, and tomahawks are just as varied as knives are in a lot of ways, and really honestly, and they're just as useful. And so we'll be going over them, and personally I think this is probably one of the more effective tools right next to knives, and it's just because you know, you could use these once again for bushcraft and for door breaching. There's guys in military and fire departments that uses axes and hatchets and stuff to breach through doors and such. There's just 1,000 different ways to utilize an axe or a tomahawk and such, and also they have a lot of versatility as far as their range goes, because I can step back and reach, but then I could also choke up and get real up close and utilize it even in tight confined spaces. It definitely does the trick for sure. Got everything all wet. Alright, so the next melee weapon I'm going to discuss is bludgeon and like kind of just overall blunt weapons. So these are kind of just a popular, like, you know, classic. A lot of people just think, hey, I'll just keep a baseball bat by the door, or, you know, even like a set of attitude readjusting paperweights here, you know, in your pocket for like EDC, or even, you know, if you even look at the FBI crime statistics, there's a lot of people that uses even just a claw hammer as a weapon. So, you know, all these can be potentially very effective, but I think they could kind of also have one major downfall, and that could be that they're all a force and energy type of weapon. So you have to put a lot of force and energy to actually connect and strike well with it, versus like, say, a knife or a tomahawk. They're sharp, and so yeah, it still helps to put force and energy, but just the edge itself is going to actually do a lot of damage on its own. And so let's test out a couple whole just pure blunt weapons. Alright, so I'm going to just test out good old classic ball bat, and this is kind of a stereotypical just home defense, you know, SHTF weapon. I know a lot of corny, you know, TV shows have showed this. So we'll test out just the good old classic ball bat. So one thing that we've been discussing with each of our melee weapons is how effective they can be within doors, because realistically that's where a lot of people might be potentially using something like that. And one issue that I brought up earlier is how you might not have enough room in your modern domicile to actually utilize your weapon. And like I was saying, a ball bat or something blunt requires, you know, actually utilizing a full swing and getting power and such behind it. And so one thing I was mentioning is stick it all the way out and just start trying to swing it. Well, I just hit a wall. Well, I just hit my TV. Well, I can't even do an overhand swing because I got a ceiling fan up above me. And so there is like kind of techniques to, you know, utilize it like this. But even, and if you had to do that, something like just this tomahawk handle might be even more effective if you were, you know, if this is all, I mean, this is just a piece of wood. About anybody can afford that. And for like EDC, you know, your attitude readjusting paperweight might be the trick. Now there's one thing I was also going to make mention, and I forgot to mention it, is one major downfall with something like this, or the ball bat, or even these, is unlike the knife, tomahawk, hatchet, whatever, the knife, tomahawk, and hatchet has 1,000 different utility uses. I can, butcher a deer, I can bushcraft, I can make shelters, I can breach a door and such. This is just a club. And there's not a whole lot of utility uses with this. And so, like, maybe the hammer might have some utility, and that's the only one I could really think of. Alright, so another weapon that we're going to be discussing for melee for SHTF is, I don't know why, but almost every zombie apocalyptic or horror movie or whatever these days, seems like they all have a character with some kind of sword, or even possibly a machete, or even, I've seen some characters with like something as, big as like a long sword or a katana. And so I'm going to discuss how a sword can be utilized in a modern SHTF type of situation. And one major disadvantage that I could already see utilizing a sword is, unlike knives and tomahawks and axes and all that good stuff, a sword essentially only has one use to it, versus a knife or a tomahawk has thousands of uses for them. And then, that being said, also I could already tell there's a reason why our soldiers, even in the early 1900s, quit carrying swords on them, was because with modern gear, say, some kind of a vest and belt and rifle and all that good stuff, it's not exactly practical to carry a sword for something that you might barely ever even need to use. And so, let's just have fun and test out a sword regardless. And have a little fun with a sword here. Alright, so another melee weapon I'm going to discuss is spears. Now, spears actually have been a weapon since, biblical times, ancient times. They've been used for hunting and such, and so that's one thing to think about with a spear, is not only can it be a defensive weapon and tool, but it could also be utilized for hunting, especially if, ammo and even archery stuff is scarce, or archery might be kind of hard to use in certain situations. And I'm not a particular great spear hunter by no means, but there's a lot of guys that's done videos that's actually quite interesting, like guys like Tim Wells and stuff that hunts with like very spears like this. Is the cold steel boar hunting spear. And one advantage about a spear, obviously, is I'm about 10 feet away from the camera, and I could almost hit that camera with the spear. So it has a lot of power, a lot of ability, and it even has the utility of being used for hunting. And that's about the extent of its utility, but it does have that. Alright, so earlier I mentioned the ball bat, or like the long sword or something, might have some inherent disadvantages inside of a house because of the obvious ability to not be able to utilize it and swing it very well. However, the spear has one advantage. Obviously you're not going to swing it very well because it's so long and such, but I could choke up on the spear and utilize it, especially like defending a small room or a hallway. It would be very hard for someone to get through this, and because I could choke up on it, I could also use it, the thrust, and it can be quite deceptive on my reach. And so I could choke up, use it for up close, but then also if they get within my reach that I know of, but they may not know it, I could thrust from, like I said, about 10 feet away almost. So that is one advantage about a spear, if you know how to utilize it. Alright, so as I was discussing the spear, it actually can be very effective and have some utility as far as hunting. But obviously, this is very awkward to carry, and unless if you had it just specifically for specific use. there's not a whole lot of sense to carrying it. But within the last, 200, 300, 400 years, another option that does a lot as a spear does, but it also is meant to be integrated in a modern soldier's equipment, is something like the bayonet. And bayonet obviously has little to no utility, especially like the spear, but definitely it doesn't do like what a survival knife or axe or anything like that does. But it, on something like this old SKS rifle, it literally takes up no space whatsoever, and I can still, a good 5-6 feet away from my body, strike an enemy with a bayonet. And bayonets been used for effective use, and especially within tight quarters like this, you have a couple people utilizing bayonets and can be quite devastating. So overall, this has just been a fun video. We were just kind of testing, some different melee weapon options. I think overall, and I'm just going to give my opinion, I think knives and axes actually has the most ability and utility as far as like melee weapons for SHTF. I think swords, is more of a Hollywood. Axes are very, have a lot of utility and ability as well.
Honestly, you don't even have to spend that much on a good axe.
Yeah, a cold steel $30 tomahawk will outperform 9/10 of other things that I've seen. So, with all that being said, get out there, have fun, be prepared both physically and spiritually. God bless, and carry on.